Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as Podcast,
Uh-huh.
where
Yeah.
we dive into really captivating stories,
Absolutely.
some stranger than fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And today we're going way back
Right.
to February 28th, 1997.
Okay.
A seemingly ordinary morning
Right.
in the San Fernando Valley.
Yeah, sunny Southern California.
Sun is shining. People are going about their day.
Uh-huh.
In the heart of North Hollywood,
Yeah.
something extraordinary,
All right.
or perhaps I should say terrifying,
Mm-hmm.
is about to unfold.
It is a story that captivated the nation. A bank robbery gone wrong,
Yeah.
escalating into one of the most intense shootouts
Oh, wow.
in American history. The North Hollywood Shootout.
And you know when you hear about bank robberies, right? You might picture
Yeah.
like quick getaways
Yeah.
and bags of cash.
Cagories running down.
Yeah, but this is different.
This was different.
Imagine two heavily armed robbers
Mm-hmm.
dressed in full body armor
Yeah.
facing off against police
Right.
in like a prolonged gun battle.
Uh-huh.
That could rival an action movie.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like.
It sounds like something straight out of Hollywood.
Yeah.
But the reality was far more chilling.
Right.
These robbers, Larry Phillips Jr. and Neil Matassarianu,
Wow, what a pair.
they were meticulous planners,
Really?
obsessed with firearms,
Interesting.
and they were about to unleash chaos
Uh-huh.
on the streets of North Hollywood.
You mentioned meticulous planning.
Oh,
Is that why
yeah.
this event became
I think that's a big part.
so infamous?
Yeah.
It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment crime, was it?
It wasn't just a spur of the moment.
Right.
These guys were dedicated, almost to a fault. They spent months casing the Bank of America branch,
Oh, wow.
studying police response times
Really?
down to the minute,
That's incredible.
and even factoring in traffic patterns
Wow.
for their escape route.
Wow, that's crazy.
They weren't your average bank robber.
No, they certainly weren't.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating
Right.
in a morbid way to think about
Yeah.
the level of detail they put into this.
Mm-hmm.
So what were they like,
Yeah.
these two individuals?
Well, they were an odd pair.
Hmm.
Almost a study in contrast.
Yeah.
Phillips had a history of petty crimes,
Okay.
drifting from one scheme to the next,
Mm-hmm.
while Masarianu actually had a background in electrical engineering.
Wow.
You'd think he'd be designing circuits, not
Yeah.
planning heists.
Yeah, you would think so.
Right.
It seems like they found common ground, though.
They did find common ground in their
Yeah.
shared obsession with firearms
Mm-hmm.
and a penchant for pushing the boundaries.
It's almost like a
Yeah.
dark buddy cop movie,
Yeah.
except it's all too real.
But it's real life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not like they...
It's not like they just stumbled into this life of crime
Right.
years before the North Hollywood shootout.
Police had actually caught them with a car full of weapons.
What?
Rifles, handguns, even
Yeah.
explosives.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So they were driving around like a mobile armory?
They were driving around
Wow.
like a mobile armory.
Hold on, wait a minute.
Yeah.
They got caught with all that
They did.
and still managed to pull off this massive robbery
Yeah.
years later.
Years later, what happened?
Well, it's a bit of a head scratcher, isn't it?
Yeah.
They were initially charged with conspiracy to commit robbery,
Okay.
but for reasons that remain unclear,
Uh-huh.
the charges were reduced.
Yeah.
They ended up serving a mere 100 days
Wow.
and walked away with most of their weapons.
Oh my gosh.
Talk about a missed opportunity.
You have to wonder what might have been different
Right.
if those initial charges had stuck.
Yeah.
This story already feels like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And we're just getting started.
We're just getting started,
Right.
and it's about to get even wilder.
Oh no.
So before we delve into the heart of the North Hollywood shootout,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the bank robbery itself.
Okay.
Remember, this wasn't just a smash and grab operation.
Mhm.
They had a plan, a timeline,
Wow.
and a chilling determination to see it through.
All right. So for anyone listening
Yeah.
who's as captivated by this story as we are,
Mm-hmm.
don't forget to hit that subscribe button
Yes.
so you don't miss the rest of our deep dive
Mhm.
into the North Hollywood shootout on Tell Me More.
On Tell Me More.
All right.
So on the morning of February 28th, 1997,
Okay.
Phillips and Matassarianu
Mm-hmm.
arrived at the Bank of America
Okay.
in a stolen white Chevy Celebrity.
Interesting.
They were dressed for war.
Oh, wow.
Literally.
Okay.
Phillips was wearing almost 40 pounds of homemade body armor,
Wow, that's a lot.
covering his entire torso,
Wow.
while Matassarianu had a lighter vest,
Okay.
but still enough to stop most handgun rounds.
So they weren't just prepared for robbery.
They weren't messing around.
Yeah.
Right.
They were prepared for a full-blown firefight.
Wow.
It's terrifying.
It really is.
To think about
Yeah.
the level of premeditation involved.
Yeah.
Did they think they were invincible?
Yeah.
It's hard to say what was going through their minds,
Right.
but there's a strange mix of meticulous planning and reckless abandon,
Oh, yeah, I see that.
you know, in their actions.
Right.
They even ingested phenobarbital,
What?
a barbiturate, to supposedly stay calm under pressure.
Phenobarbital.
Yeah.
Isn't that a...
It's usually prescribed as a sleep aid or an anti-seizure medication.
Right.
It can have a calming effect,
Okay.
but in high doses or when mixed with other substances,
Right.
it can also impair judgment and lead to unpredictable behavior.
So they were going into this armed to the teeth.
Armed to the teeth.
And potentially under the influence of a drug that could cloud their judgment.
Potentially.
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, that's where things
Oh,
take an interesting turn.
okay.
They stormed into the bank,
Right.
firing their modified automatic rifles
Wow.
into the ceiling,
Okay.
terrifying everyone inside.
Right.
They forced the assistant manager to open the vault,
Ah.
expecting a massive payday,
Right.
but there was a catch.
Let me guess.
Yeah.
The vault wasn't overflowing
You got it.
with cash.
The bank had significantly less money
Oh, wow.
than they expected.
Okay.
And here's where the meticulous planning seems to unravel.
Okay.
Matassariano, enraged by the smaller haul,
Wow.
starts spraying bullets into the vault, destroying a good chunk of the money they did manage to get.
Serious.
It was almost like a tantrum.
That's incredible.
Right.
All that planning.
I know.
All that risk.
All that risk.
And then they sabotage
They
themselves.
sabotage themselves.
With this outburst of frustration.
Outburst of frustration.
It's fascinating insight into their mindset. Were they starting to panic?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But the combination of phenobarbital, the unexpected setback,
Right.
and the sheer adrenaline of the situation might have pushed them over the edge.
Okay.
Whatever the reason.
Right.
Their actions were about to have consequences far beyond the walls of that bank.
So the stage is set.
Right.
Tensions are high. And they've just destroyed a portion of their loot.
A portion of their loot.
What happens when they try to make their escape?
Well, as they exited the bank, their 8-minute window had already evaporated. They were met with a scene they hadn't quite anticipated. Police officers, alerted by panicked calls from inside the bank, were already on the scene.
Wow.
So their initial response was quickly overwhelmed.
I can only imagine the chaos. So these officers are probably expecting like a somewhat routine bank robbery response.
Yeah.
And suddenly they find themselves facing two heavily armored individuals armed with modified automatic weapons.
Wow.
The officers equipped with standard issue handguns and shotguns found their bullets literally bouncing off the robbers' body armor.
Wow, are you serious?
They were pinned down by the sheer volume of fire forced to take cover.
Behind their cars.
Yeah, behind their patrol cars.
Right.
Which, let's face it, offered minimal protection against the firepower Phillips and Massariano were unleashing.
That must have been a terrifying experience.
Oh, it was.
For those officers,
Absolutely.
You know, realizing their everyday equipment was inadequate against this level of firepower.
Some officers, in a desperate attempt to even the odds, ran to a nearby gun store.
Commandeering AR-15s just to have a fighting chance.
Wow, so they were having to improvise.
They're improvising.
Their weaponry. In the middle of a shootout.
In the middle of a shootout.
Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
What a stark contrast.
Yeah.
To the meticulous planning of the robbers, highlighting the unpredictable nature of this event.
Absolutely.
But this wasn't just...
This wasn't just a shootout between two parties.
Right.
What about the civilians caught in the crossfire?
It's a miracle more people weren't hurt or killed.
Yeah.
Given the sheer volume of ammunition exchanged.
Right.
News helicopters capturing the events as they unfolded. Broadcast live footage of this
unbelievable
scene
to a stunned national audience.
Right.
You can actually find some of that footage online.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Showing bullets ricocheting off pavement.
Oh, my God.
Civilians running for cover and the sheer chaos of the situation.
Yeah, it must have been so surreal.
Oh, absolutely.
For those watching from the safety of their homes.
Yeah.
You know, seeing this level of violence.
This level of violence.
Unfold live on their TV screens.
Absolutely. And for those caught in the crossfire, it was a terrifying ordeal.
Right.
8 civilians were injured.
Oh, wow.
During the shootout.
Okay.
Highlighting the indiscriminate nature of such violence.
So we have outgunned police officers.
Yeah.
Heavily armed robbers.
Right.
Seemingly unfazed by return fire.
Right.
And terrified civilians caught in the middle. Was there any hope?
Well, the turning point, though it wouldn't come quickly, was the arrival of the LAPD's SWAT team.
Okay.
Now, remember, this was 1997.
Yeah.
SWAT teams back then weren't typically equipped for this level of sustained firepower.
Right. It wasn't your average hostage situation.
It wasn't a hostage situation.
Right. This was a full-blown firefight.
A full-blown firefight.
The likes of which the LAPD hadn't encountered before.
Right. But these officers, highly trained, and with access to heavier weapons, like AR-15s, began to shift the balance of power.
Okay.
They even commandeered an armored car.
Wow.
Not to engage the robbers, but to help evacuate wounded officers and civilians, showing a remarkable commitment to protecting lives in the midst of this chaos.
The arrival of the SWAT team must have been a relief.
Oh, absolutely.
For those officers pinned down by the robbers' relentless gunfire.
Absolutely.
Did this mark the beginning of the end?
It did, but their downfall wouldn't be quick or clean.
Right.
The shootout raged for almost an hour.
Wow.
With both sides exchanging hundreds of rounds.
Oh, my gosh.
The robbers, despite their heavy armor, were starting to sustain injuries.
Okay.
Phillips, while taking cover behind a semi-truck, was shot in the wrist.
Oh, no.
And his rifle jammed.
Okay.
He tried to clear it, but he was losing blood. Yeah.
And the police were closing in.
They're meticulous planning their escape route.
Right.
All of it seemed to be unraveling under the pressure.
Under the pressure.
Of the SWAT team's response.
Right.
What about Matassarianu? Did he try to make a run for it?
He did. He tried to escape in their getaway car.
Okay.
Driving erratically, attempting to carjack other vehicles.
Oh, wow.
But the police had him surrounded.
So they had him.
He was eventually pinned down by SWAT officers.
Okay.
Unable to escape the closing net.
So both robbers are trapped.
Right.
Their escape plan thwarted.
Thwarted.
What were their final moments like?
Well,
how did this dramatic confrontation finally come to an end?
Well, Phillips, realizing there was no way out, took his own life.
Oh, wow.
He took out his Beretta pistol, placed it under his chin, and pulled the trigger.
Wow.
Matassarianu, severely wounded and bleeding profusely from leg wounds, surrendered to the police.
Okay.
Tragically, he died before paramedics could reach him.
Oh, wow.
Adding another layer of controversy to this already complex event.
It's a grim end.
It is.
To a day that began like any other.
Right.
What started as a meticulously planned bank robbery spiraled into a chaotic shootout. Exposing vulnerabilities in law enforcement.
Absolutely.
And captivating a nation.
Right.
With its dramatic, albeit tragic events.
Yeah, it was a very dramatic event.
So this event obviously had a huge impact on the LAPD.
Oh, yeah.
What were some of the long-term changes that came about as a result of the North Hollywood shootout?
Well, the North Hollywood shootout was a wake-up call for law enforcement agencies across the country. It exposed a critical gap in firepower and tactical preparedness when facing heavily armed criminals.
You can't underestimate the impact of seeing police officers outgunned on live television.
Live television. Yeah. And it sparked a national debate.
Yeah. About police militarization.
It was a turning point, right?
It was a turning point.
It made people question whether police departments were equipped to handle the increasingly violent criminal landscape.
Yeah.
So what specific changes did we see in law enforcement after this incident?
Well, the most immediate change was the adoption of more powerful weapons. The LAPD and many other departments across the U.S. Began equipping their officers with AR-15s, recognizing the need for greater firepower to match the threat they were facing.
Makes sense.
They also started issuing better body armor, capable of withstanding high-caliber rounds.
Seems like a logical response.
It does.
To the challenges they faced during the shootout.
Yeah.
But did it raise concerns?
It did raise concern about the militarization of the police.
Yeah.
I mean, equipping officers with military-grade weapons could be seen as blurring the lines between law enforcement and military action.
That's a debate that continues to this day, right?
It does continue. Yeah. Some argue that police need these tools to protect themselves and the public from heavily armed criminals.
Right.
Others worry about the potential for abuse and the escalation of violence when police are equipped like soldiers.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
It is.
Were there any other changes?
There were.
Okay.
Beyond equipment upgrades. Absolutely. The North Hollywood Shootout also led to the development of new training protocols and strategies for active shooter situations involving heavily armed suspects.
So they realized that the old methods of containment and negotiation wouldn't cut it against criminals.
These criminals weren't interested in negotiating. They were willing to engage in prolonged firefights.
So they had to adapt their tactics.
Absolutely.
Moving away from a reactive approach.
Yeah, a reactive approach.
To a more proactive one.
A proactive one.
You know, ready to engage with these highly dangerous situations.
Exactly. They implemented training programs that focused on rapid response tactical movement and the use of heavier weaponry.
Wow.
They also began to emphasize communication and coordination between different units.
Something that was lacking in the initial response.
In the initial response to the North Hollywood Shootout.
It sounds like they learned some hard lessons.
They did.
From that day.
Yeah.
And the changes implemented have likely saved lives in subsequent incidents.
Absolutely. That's the hope.
Yeah.
The North Hollywood Shootout forced law enforcement to adapt and evolve, to rethink their approach to public safety in a world where criminals have access to increasingly sophisticated weaponry.
It's a fascinating case study.
It is.
In how a single event can trigger widespread changes. Not just in equipment, but in mindset and tactics.
Mindset and tactics, exactly.
You know, the ripple effects of that day in North Hollywood are still felt today.
It's a reminder that even in a seemingly ordinary day, extraordinary and sometimes terrifying events can unfold.
It highlights the bravery of those
absolutely.
who put their lives on the line to protect others. And the ongoing challenges law enforcement faces in keeping our communities safe.
It's a story that stays with you.
Yeah.
A reminder of the unexpected turns life can take and the ripple effects that seemingly isolated events can have on society as a whole.
And it raises important questions.
It does.
About our relationship with firearms, the preparedness of law enforcement, and the difficult balance between public safety and individual rights.
Absolutely.
So much to ponder.
There is.
Well, thank you for diving into this fascinating, albeit intense story with me today.
My pleasure.
On Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast.
Of course.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it as captivating and thought-provoking as we did.
Absolutely.
Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our future explorations into the stories that shape our world.